In a world where people name their pets, their cars and their plants, one boy decided to name his penis the President. Yes, you heard it right, folks. Not Mr. Wiggly, not Little Buddy, but the President. Now, this wasn't some random act of teenage rebellion or hormonal confusion. Oh no, this was a well-thought-out, carefully considered decision. A decision, my dear listeners, that would set the stage for a comedy of errors, a whirlwind of misunderstandings, and a laugh riot that would make a hyena blush. The boy, in his infinite wisdom and seemingly unending desire to spice up his life, chose to christen his nether region with a title reserved for the highest office in the land. And thus, the President was born, not in a political rally, but in a teenager's bedroom. Then came the election season. The air was thick with political jargon, campaign slogans, and one very confused boy. Our protagonist, let's call him Timmy, found himself in a world where his personal life and the public sphere became hilariously intertwined. Timmy would sit in his history class, doodling away, when suddenly, "The President's policies have shaped our nation's future," his teacher would announce. A giggle would escape Timmy, followed by a blush as red as a ripe tomato. "That's not my..." he'd whisper, trailing off as his classmates turned to look at him. At home, the dinner table discussions were no different. His father, an ardent political enthusiast, would go on and on about the President's handling of the economy. Timmy's spoon would freeze midway to his mouth, his eyes wide, a grin spreading across his face. "Dad, you're talking about my..." he'd start, only to be shushed by his mother. And oh, the public spaces were a riot. Billboards, campaign ads on buses, even the elderly couple's conversation next to him on the park bench. The President was everywhere. Timmy would often find himself snickering at the most inappropriate moments. "Can the President really handle another 4 years?" a news headline would read. "Well, I sure hope so," Timmy would chuckle to himself, his mind whirling with images of his... well, you know. But it wasn't all fun and games. The confusion was real. Was his president truly up for re-election? Could his president influence the country's future? The questions were many. The answers, well, none. But amidst the chaos, one thing was certain. Timmy's world was a roller coaster, his life a comedy of errors. Every time someone mentioned the president, his eyebrows would raise, a blush would creep onto his face, and he'd mumble, "That's not my penis." But for us, it was a laugh riot, a comic relief in the midst of an otherwise serious election season. And for that we say, long live the president. As the election heated up, so did the boy's imagination. He began to fantasize about his penis running the country. Now you might be thinking, how could a penis run a country? Well, the boy had this all figured out. In his daydreams, his little friend wasn't just any presidential figure. This was a penis of the people, by the people, for the people. He visualized his penis, which he endearingly called the President, sitting behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. Just picture it. The President wearing a tiny top hat, leaning back in the plush presidential armchair, one hand base on the phone, discussing international affairs. He'd be signing bills into law with a microscopic pen, making decisions that would impact the nation. The boy even imagined the President giving speeches. Now, of course, the President didn't have a mouth, but in the boy's imagination it didn't need one. The boy would provide the voice, and the President would provide the charisma. The boy's daydreams didn't stop there. In his mind, he saw the president conducting press conferences, answering questions, and handling the media like a pro. And let's not forget about the state dinners. The president, decked out in a tiny tuxedo, mingling with world leaders, charming everyone with its stand-up personality. The boy's imagination was a whirlwind of hilarity. Every time he heard someone talk about the president on the news, he would chuckle to himself, thinking about his own little commander-in-chief. He found the whole situation absurdly entertaining, and it provided him with endless amusement. The boy even went so far as to imagine a tiny presidential seal on his underwear. Yes, you heard it right. His underwear became the White House, and his penis, the president, was always in command. He'd strut around, secretly feeling like the most powerful boy in the world. He even imagined a tiny presidential seal on his underwear. The president was truly in command. But not everyone was a fan of the president. Some claimed, "That's not my penis." Now this is where our story takes a surreal turn. Imagine the boy's confusion as he hears these criticisms. His eyebrows furrowed, his ears perked up, and his cheeks flushed. He's at a loss. He starts to wonder, are they talking about my president? He's genuinely baffled, and the perplexity of it all makes him a tad bit defensive. He's listening to people complain about the president's performance, but all he hears is a critique of his own. Well, you know, the boy is like a one-man cheer squad, rooting for his president while the world seems to be against it. The situation is absurd, sure, but you can't help but chuckle at his earnestness. He hears things like, the president is not performing well, and he's quick to retort, hey, I think the president is doing just fine. He's a little guy with a big heart, defending his president with the fierceness of a lion. It's like he's taken all these criticisms personally, and it's both hilarious and slightly endearing. This young lad, in his innocent confusion, becomes a symbol of unwavering support. His dedication to his president is unshaken, even as he hears phrases like, the president is not up to the task. He's quick to respond, my president is more than capable. His defense is both comical and heartwarming, like a kid defending his favorite superhero. As the criticisms pile up, he stands his ground. He's adamant, resilient, and slightly stubborn. In his mind, his president is flawless, and he's not afraid to voice his opinion. He's like a tiny David standing up to a giant Goliath, armed with nothing but his unwavering faith in his president. And so, despite the mounting opposition, the boy stands tall. He defends his president with a passion that's both admirable and amusing. He's a beacon of loyalty in a sea of critics, and it's impossible not to laugh at his earnestness. He found himself arguing with the TV. Hey, my president is doing his best. Finally, the election day arrived. The nation held its breath, and so did the boy. With the same intensity of a rocket launch, the countdown to the final polling hour began. And our little hero, well, he was as jittery as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Imagine, if you will, a boy convinced that the fate of his nation, nay, the world, rested squarely on his presidential shoulders. Every mention of the president on TV, every passionate debate at the dinner table, every heated argument between neighbours, he took it all quite personally. As the day wore on, the boy's nerves were stretched tighter than an overplayed guitar string. He found himself in a state of perpetual cringe, a living embodiment of the phrase, on tenterhooks. The suspense was eating at him like a caterpillar on a leaf, gnawing away at his sanity bit by bit. Then came the moment of truth. The polls closed, the votes were counted, the results were announced, the president was re-elected. The boy's relief was palpable, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. A celebratory mood engulfed him, comparable only to a dog reunited with its owner after a long, lonely day. He danced around the house, his joy infectious. His parents, bemused, watched their son's peculiar display of patriotism. But to our hero, it was a victory sweeter than any candy. His president, his pride, would continue to rule. The world remained in safe hands, safe pants. His laughter echoed through the house, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. His president had triumphed against all odds. He felt a sense of pride swell within him, like a balloon being filled with helium, ready to burst any moment. And so the president would rule for another 4 years. The boy couldn't have been prouder. The president left a lasting legacy, not on the country, but on a boy's understanding of politics. Our young protagonist found himself plunged into the whirlwind world of political discourse, all thanks to his uniquely named appendage. He'd sit in front of the TV, watching debates and speeches, his hand automatically drifting to his pants, as if to reassure the president that he was doing a good job. And let's not forget the election parties. He'd listen to his parents and their friends discuss the president's policies, all the while stifling giggles because, well, you know why. It was a strange journey indeed, but it wasn't all fun and games. The boy learned about propaganda, about the power of words and the importance of standing up, quite literally in his case, for what you believe in. And so, the boy learned one of life's most important lessons. It's not about the name, it's about the person, or in this case, the penis.